The summer air was thick with the scent of pine and the promise of adventure as Sarah, Mike, Jenny, and Tom set off on their much-anticipated camping trip. The four friends had been planning this escape to the Whispering Woods for months, eager to disconnect from the hustle and bustle of city life and immerse themselves in nature. Nestled deep within the forest, the Whispering Woods was known for its serene beauty, crystal-clear lakes, and dense, towering trees that seemed to touch the sky. After a 3-hour drive and a short hike, they arrived at their chosen campsite. It was a small clearing surrounded by a circle of ancient trees, their gnarled branches reaching out like the fingers of an old, protective guardian. The sun filtered through the canopy, casting dappled shadows on the forest floor. "This place is perfect," Sarah exclaimed, dropping her backpack and stretching her arms above her head. "I can already feel the stress melting away." Mike grinned as he set up the tent. "Just wait until we start the campfire tonight. We'll roast marshmallows and tell ghost stories." Jenny, ever the practical one, began unpacking the supplies. "Let's get everything set up first. We need to collect firewood and get water from the stream before it gets dark." Tom nodded, adjusting his glasses. "I'll help with the firewood. Mike, you want to come with me?" The two men disappeared into the forest, leaving Sarah and Jenny to finish setting up the camp. The sounds of birds chirping and leaves rustling in the breeze created a peaceful ambience, making it easy for them to forget the troubles of the outside world. As the sun began to set, the group gathered around the campfire, its flames dancing and crackling. They roasted marshmallows, shared stories, and laughed, the flickering light casting eerie shadows on their faces. It was the perfect start to their weekend getaway. Later that night, the friends retired to their tent, the sounds of the forest lulling them to sleep. The night was cool, and the air was filled with the fragrance of damp earth and pine needles. Sarah woke first, startled by a noise outside the tent. She listened intently, her heart pounding. It sounded like whispering, low and indistinct. She shook her head, convincing herself it was just the wind. The next morning, she mentioned it to the group as they ate breakfast. "Did anyone else hear whispering last night?" Mike shrugged. "Probably just the wind or animals. This place is called the Whispering Woods, after all." They laughed it off and spent the day hiking, swimming in the lake, and enjoying each other's company. But as night fell, an uneasy feeling settled over them. That night, the whispering returned. This time, it was louder, more insistent. Sarah sat up, her breath catching in her throat. She wasn't imagining it. The whispers seemed to be coming from just outside the tent. "Guys, wake up," she hissed, shaking Mike awake. "Do you hear that?" Mike listened, his eyes widening. "Yeah, I hear it." "What the hell is that?" Jenny and Tom stirred, groggy and confused. "What's going on?" Jenny asked. "Listen," Sarah whispered. They all fell silent, straining to hear. The whispers were faint but unmistakable, like a group of people murmuring just out of sight. It sent chills down their spines. Tom grabbed a flashlight. "I'm going to check it out." "Are you crazy?" Jenny whispered fiercely. "What if it's dangerous?" "We can't just sit here and do nothing," Tom argued. "Stay here. I'll be right back." He unzipped the tent and stepped outside, the beam of his flashlight cutting through the darkness. The others watched anxiously, their hearts pounding. Tom walked a few steps, the whispers growing louder. He swung the flashlight around, but there was nothing there. Just trees and shadows. "Tom," Sarah called softly. "Do you see anything?" He shook his head. "Nothing. It's just," suddenly, the whispers stopped. The silence was deafening, as if the forest itself was holding its breath. Tom felt a cold shiver run down his spine. He turned to go back to the tent when he saw it, a shadowy figure standing among the trees, just at the edge of the light. "Who's there?" he called out, his voice trembling. The figure didn't move. It just stood there, watching. Tom backed away slowly, not taking his eyes off the figure. When he reached the tent, he dove inside and zipped it up. "What did you see?" Mike asked, his face pale. "There's someone out there," Tom whispered, his voice shaking. "Or something." The next morning, they decided to pack up and leave. The fun and relaxation of their trip had been replaced by fear and unease. But as they were packing, Jenny found something that made them stop in their tracks. "Guys, look at this," she said, holding up a piece of old, weathered parchment. "Where did you find that?" Sarah asked. "It was buried under some leaves near the edge of the clearing," Jenny replied. They gathered around to examine the parchment. It was covered in strange symbols and writing in a language they couldn't understand. At the bottom was a crude drawing of a figure with long, spindly arms and a face that seemed to be screaming. "This is creepy," Mike said, shuddering. "What do you think it means?" "I don't know," Tom replied, "but I think we should get out of here." They hurriedly finished packing and began the hike back to their car. The forest seemed darker, more oppressive, as if it was closing in around them. The whispering had stopped, but the feeling of being watched remained. As they made their way through the forest, they heard footsteps behind them. They quickened their pace, but the footsteps matched their speed. It was as if someone, or something, was following them. "Don't look back," Tom whispered. "Just keep moving." The footsteps grew louder, closer. Panic set in, and they broke into a run. The forest seemed to blur around them, the trees a dark, indistinct mass. The only sound was their ragged breathing and the pounding of their hearts. Suddenly, Sarah tripped and fell, crying out in pain. Mike and Tom helped her up, but she couldn't put weight on her ankle. "We have to carry her," Jenny said urgently. "We can't stay here." Tom and Mike each took one of Sarah's arms and began to carry her, their pace slower but determined. The footsteps were right behind them now, almost on top of them. "Faster," Jenny urged. "We're almost there." They burst into the clearing where their car was parked, the footsteps stopping abruptly. They didn't look back as they piled into the car, Mike fumbling with the keys. The engine roared to life, and they sped away, not daring to stop until they were miles from the forest. Back in the safety of their apartment, the friends tried to make sense of what had happened. They researched the parchment, but found nothing that made sense. The Whispering Woods, it turned out, had a dark history. There were stories of disappearances, of strange occurrences that defied explanation. "It's like the forest is alive," Sarah said, her voice trembling. "Like it didn't want us there." They agreed to never speak of the trip again, to try and forget the terror they had experienced. But the whispering haunted their dreams, a constant reminder of the darkness they had encountered. Years passed, and the friends drifted apart, each dealing with their own nightmares. The Whispering Woods became a distant memory, a ghost story they couldn't escape. One crisp autumn evening, Tom received a letter in the mail. It was an invitation to a reunion at the Whispering Woods, signed by Sarah, Mike, and Jenny. His heart pounded as he read the words, a sense of dread settling over him. Why would they want to go back? He called Sarah, but her number was disconnected. He tried Mike and Jenny, but they too were unreachable. Against his better judgment, Tom decided to go. He needed answers, closure. When he arrived at the clearing, it was just as he remembered. The ancient trees, the circle of light, the oppressive silence. He called out for his friends, but there was no response. Just the whispering, growing louder, more insistent. Tom realized too late that the invitation had been a trap. The forest had called them back, one by one, to finish what it had started. As the shadows closed in around him, Tom understood that they had never truly left the Whispering Woods. And they never would.